Welcome back to Better Than Before. I'm Tony Richards, and I'm here to do your leadership and business lesson. And this week, I want to talk to you about big ideas for your family focus. You know, family provides the foundation for an extraordinary life, and there's so many ways to connect with people socially today that it's amazing how we lose connection with people that are supposed to be the closest to us. We get seduced in trying to be great at our jobs, at work, and our careers, that we forget the most important human connections that we should have. A human moment is an authentic moment, and it's when two people have a face-to-face, being present with each other, authentic type conversation and interaction. It gives you a superior feeling of well-being. And one trait of successful people that I've coached, worked with, and been around is they have a strong sense of family and strong sense of community. And so today I'm going to focus on family. And big idea number one I want to share with you in this lesson is spend quantity and quality time with those you love. So I'm going to be a little loose with the definition of family, because it doesn't have to be blood relatives. It's the community that you immerse yourself in, right? You could have a whole bunch of people you consider to be your family that you want to spend time with, or it could be your immediate family, yourself, your wife, or you and your husband and your children. It could be, your cousins, your sisters, depending. Some people have rather large families and other people have small, intimate families. It doesn't really matter. But the thing is, whatever you consider to be family, just do not take them for granted. I have talked to so many people who have lost loved ones who have said, I really feel like I took them for granted and now I've lost them, and I really wish I could go back and do some things over, having so many regrets, right? As we go through life, we have to make sure that we live our life in such a way that we are anti-regret. We don't have to worry about that. The philosopher Gertrude said once that if children grew up according to early indications, we would have nothing in society but geniuses. So, we need to raise our kids and interact with our kids as part of our family, and we need to keep our bad beliefs away from them. We need to keep our wrong assumptions away from them. And, I heard it said one time that we don't raise children for the world they're going to know. We raise children for the world we know. And by the time they grow up, it's not our world anymore. It's a completely different world. So it's really important to spend quality time with your kids in these family moments. One thing I picked up from Chip and Dan Heath from the book, The Power of Moments, is that life is really just a series of moments. So you schedule in times to spend together. Maybe you get together and you tell stories. Maybe you get together and you read. You ask yourself, how can I bring more adventure into our family's lives? Do interesting things together. As human beings, we crave novelty. We want to freshen things up. We don't want our brains to get bored and fall into disengagement. So talking and communication is so important and so fundamental in our family interactions. Don't go to bed angry. Don't go to bed frustrated with any family member. Because again, we need to have anti-regret. And often our greatest regrets are the love you didn't give somebody or the words you didn't speak. You can never be open enough with your family. You might feel silly for a moment if you take a risk, or if you don't, you might feel regret for a lifetime. And at the end of our life, one of the most important things will be how we conducted ourselves with what we call and what we define as our family. Do you uplift your family, or do you tear down your family? Does your family lift you up? Does your family tear you down? You gotta work to find the sweet spot. Big idea number 2, never stop focusing on and improving your family culture. And I want to keep saying this over and over. Your family is whatever you define it as. In some ways, my employees are part of my family. Producer Bill's part of my family. Associate producer Whitney on the show is part of my family. Caitlin, our media director, is part of my family. Amanda's, my project manager, is part of my family. Some of our clients I would consider to be part of our family. Because my blood family lives in Kentucky. So I've got a community here in Missouri that I would consider to be family. So it's how you define it, right? But you always want to focus on and improve your family culture. And remember, what you focus on grows. What you take focus away from dies. Because when you focus energy. And whatever you give energy to is going to grow. Whatever you take energy away from is going to wither and die. So the things you focus on usually get better. 80% of our results come from 20% of the things we do. Always be improving it. Always be spending time on it. Always be focusing on it. Ask yourself, what does this family, the way I define family, stand for? What is the point of being successful and losing your family? There is no point, right? So you have to be thinking constantly about how you can focus and how you can improve your family. And one way is to be responsive with them and to be proactive with them and not to be reactive with them. I heard it said once that success is a few daily acts that lead to critical mass of momentum. And by the same token, failure is a few daily acts of neglect that lead to a large collapse. And that being said, leads me to big idea number 3, develop family rhythms. We do it with every client we work with. We tell them, in execution of your plan, you have to develop rhythms. And rhythms are, how often are we going to meet and what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about priorities. We're going to talk about data. We're going to talk about key performance indicators. You can have all those things in your family too, right? Your family can have priorities. Your family can have data that's discussed. And your family can have regular times where you get together, right? Rhythms are so powerful. When you do them on a consistent basis, you generate profound results. Think about the way you start the day. With your kids, let's say. How do you start the day with your kids? Is it very rhythmic and very proactive, or is it like chaos? Remember this, the way you start your day will define your day. And you might be saying, oh my gosh, I really need to change the way I start my day because holy cow, it's like a bomb goes off and things go everywhere and everybody's rushing around and everybody's hair's on fire. And well, maybe you ought to have a family conversation about that, right? And put some of those things in order. Now, what would a family rhythm consist of? Number 1, schedule times together that no one misses or cancels. Now, I don't know, but I think we're losing some of this in our culture today with our families. But it was very much in place when I grew up in my family. We had meal time that was not missed and was not canceled. And we had breakfast at 6:30 in the morning. We had dinner at 5:30 in the afternoon. We had lunch at 11:30 during the day. And it was not selective. It was mandatory. You showed up. Everybody had their seat at the table they sat in. And we talked about things that either were going to happen that day at breakfast, or we talked about things that were happening that day at lunch, or we talked about the things that did happen during the day at dinner and maybe what was going to happen tomorrow, or we talked about the things that were going on. Number 2, capture the moments together as often as possible. I wish when I was growing up we had the tools we have now. I wish I would have, the only thing I have are just the memories in my mind of those meals that we shared together. But it wasn't just meals. I mean, we had church also. that we went together to church, and it wasn't selective, it was mandatory, right? We didn't necessarily do this, but you could have a movie night, you could have game night. There's all sorts of things. You don't just have to have a family meeting, but in these rhythms that you design for your family to spend time together, they can have a certain structure to them, right? And number three, as far as big idea number three, develop family rhythms, I would say, make sure you devise some ways to have some fun with your family. Make sure you put some fun into it, whatever it is that you do. But you need to put some of those rhythms in where everybody gets together and you do things and you discuss and you share. And I want to share with you, this really touched my heart, so I want to pass it on to you. And this was shared with me by a father. So this can also apply to a mom. But this was a dad who said he had a nightly rhythm with his kids. He never missed it. He did it every single night. And he said, I told them 4 things. Number 1, whatever you want to do when you grow up, you can do it. And he said, I made sure they understood I was talking about them. I wasn't projecting off of myself. It had nothing to do with me. It was all about them. Number 1, whatever you want to do when you grow up, it's possible. You can do it. Number 2, whatever you do, do it really well. Number 3, never give up on something you deeply care about. And number 4, thing he told them every single night, don't forget how much your Father loves you, no matter what. Don't forget how much your Father loves you. So he told them every night at bedtime, up and through their teenage years, every night he told them those 4 things. Can you imagine the powerful impact that had on their life? And that was a nightly rhythm that he did every single night. Big idea number 4, and this is my last one. Your children will become more like you than you can ever imagine. And I talk about this a lot when I talk about leadership is about duplication, and it's about creating more leaders. It's not about creating more followers. We are in the business as leaders of producing more leaders. So we are constantly passing on our leadership DNA. And you have to be really careful about that, because you have and I have some bad habits, and we have some bad stuff in our leadership DNA. And we have a lot of good stuff too, but the bad stuff is going to be passed on as well. And the example I give is, do you ever see anything in your children you wish you didn't see? And everybody always laughs and says, oh yeah, I see myself in them, and it's not always good. That's right. Your children will become more like you than you can ever imagine. You know, Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. So you are an outstanding model for your children. You have to make sure that you're showing them your best all the time. It's amazing to me the amount of bad words we will use around our kids, and then we are simply surprised that when they cuss. Well, where do you think they picked it up from, right? You have to lead by example. You're the model that they see the most. And if you are active and proactive in developing your kids, you will see a wonderful payoff to that. I'll give you 2 great examples, and these are 2 very famous families in American history. One is the Kennedys. And at the Kennedy household, over dinner, their dad, Joe Kennedy, this is John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy's father, he would bring guests to the house for dinner, and the kids had to formulate questions for the guest. So the dinner conversation would be led by the children, and they had to spend some time thinking about and researching questions they wanted to ask the people that their father would bring home to dinner, which I thought was kind of cool. And then the Rockefellers, John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest men who's ever lived, his children, they got a certain amount of allowance every week, and they were responsible for their own accounting and budget. And so they had to come in every week and give a report about what they did with their allowance, whether they saved it, whether they invested it, or whether they spent it. And they had to account for every single penny of it and give a report on what they did with what they were given, which I think is a really good exercise also. You got a really small window of opportunity with your kids. They're never going to be the age they are now. This is, they're only going to be this age one time. And once that window of opportunity closes, it's really hard to open it again. And sometimes it never opens again. So those are my big ideas for you. We talk about business, we talk about being successful leaders, and we talk about all these success principles. Today I thought, let's just focus on something that's really, really important to all of us, and that is whatever it is that you call your family. That's our show today. We'll see you again next time on Better Than Before, and remember, everything gets better when you get better.
Thank you for listening to Better Than Before with Tony Richards, a business leaders podcast powered by Clear Vision Development Group. For more resources from Tony, visit clearvisiondevelopment.com. Join us next time for another episode of Better Than Before with Tony Richards.